Evening to all our viewers today. Today we have with us a powerhouse. She's a founder CEO of EcoFashion Corp's greenhouse of brands, MetaWear, yes, and Farm to Home, Seed to Style, Farm to Flight, and Reset. And she's also the founder and former CEO of Under the Canopy. Marci has coined the term and pioneered the market of eco fashion. She has also authored the book of Eco Renaissance, co creating a stylish, sexy, and sustainable world. She has been featured in the book Eco Amazon's 20 Women Who Are Transforming the World, Natural Product Industries, Socially Responsible Business Award, Retail Touchpoints, Retail Innovator Award, New York Moves Power Woman Award, Fashion Group Internationals Rising Star Award, and prestigious Henry Crown Fellowship of the Aspen Institute. Let us all welcome Marzi Zaroff, founder and CEO of EcoFashion Corp. Welcome, Marzi.
Thank you, Harsha. It's great to be here. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Hello from New York City.
It's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you. Very nice to wake up to this connectivity with all of you, and especially my deep affinity in India. So it's nice to have the bridge in front of us.
Wonderful. Now, Marci, you have been an entrepreneur for most part of your professional career, from food to fashion. What was the inspiration behind sustainability?
Yeah, well, when I was 16 years old, a girlfriend of mine gave me a book called Living in the Light by Shakti Gawain. And when I read the book, it struck a very deep chord in me. There's much more than what we see, right? And as I started to integrate what the book was about, I dove headfirst into becoming a vegetarian, practicing yoga, embracing and sort of immersing myself in the health and wellness and sustainability movements, and just started to teach myself, through going to conferences and reading books, um, all the different ways that we can enhance our lives. And people started to ask me what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I started to realize that, the most basic need that we have, right, as Maslow's hierarchy of needs defines, is food. And I started to teach people about how to eat healthier, right? And I then opened the first school that today is world renowned. It's the world's largest holistic health nutrition school. It's known as the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and has certified over 150,000 people worldwide as health coaches in over 140 countries around the world. And in, working with the school, I started to realize that there's so much more than just what we put in our bodies. There's also, what we put on our bodies. And that sort of led me to connect the dots to beauty at first with the founder of Aveda, who became my mentor of over 25 years. And he was iconic in the world of sustainability. He was really pioneering the transformation of the personal care industry. And when we together realized that food and beauty were very interconnected, we started to collaborate quite a bit. And then from there, I discovered what a link in the whole wellness and sustainability equation. We started to look at fiber and textiles, which again, next basic need, what we put on our bodies, right? And when I started to understand all of the impacts that were going into the fashion and textile industry, just by pulling the curtain back, I dove in, I coined and trademarked the term eco-fashion in 1995, and I really set out on a journey to revolutionize the fashion industry through education and inspiration and innovation and collaboration, and really look to take the systems that once existed in fashion and, style the world of change and change the world of style. And that really set me on my, journey over the last 27 years, pioneering the sustainable fashion movement, to where I am today, where it's no longer even about staying ahead. It's about not being left behind. Sustainability is now on the radar of every single brand retailer, designer in the fashion industry. This is the moment I've been waiting for. So it's been a long and winding road, but I always knew it was not an if, it was a when.
Wonderful, very inspirational. And now that you are a part of the textile industry, which is one of the most polluting industry, what are the measures that you are taking at EcoFashion in order to ensure sustainability?
Yeah, so today I'm the founder and CEO of ECOfashion Corp, and we are a greenhouse of brands, right? We're built on sort of the common platform that our first brand is called MetaWear. And MetaWear is a turnkey plug and play solution provider. It's a manufacturing platform. Actually, we have an office in Mumbai. We have a whole team on the ground there, and most of our factories are in India. So our teams work with our teams in India work with our team here in the US, and we meet brands and retailers where they are, and we take them on this journey of sustainability. So the things that we look at, first of all, we have our own farm project down in Tamil Nadu that is called Reset, and it stands for Regenerate the Environment, Society, and Economy through Textiles. At the farm level, we are providing seeds and training to the farmers to help them move from conventional cotton farming into more sustainable farming using methodologies of regenerative and organic agriculture. So crop rotation, cover cropping, green manure, low or no tillage to build soil health. Because what a lot of people don't know is that soil is one of our greatest solutions to climate change. When soil is healthy, it sequesters carbon out of the atmosphere. When it becomes dirt, it reflects carbon back out, and even water doesn't get retained in the soil. It runs off. And all those toxic chemicals in conventional agriculture end up in the water systems, end up in the air, and end up harming the farmers. So going back to at the farm level, we're building soil health to make the plants more resilient to climate change, which is what the farmers want. Secondly, we have a women's empowerment project at the ground where we're really looking to work with our female farmers and help drive other forms of income, further education, and other ways we can support women. In addition to that, all cotton on our farms is free of all GMOs, harmful pesticides, insecticides, and herbicides, and using all natural fertilizers from the ground as part of these methodologies. So our business model is really about navigating supply chains efficiently from farm to finished product. We make women's apparel, men's, kids, baby, home, in all categories for other brands and retailers, private label. And then we have 3 of our own brands. One is called Yes And, which is at joinyesand.com. And that brand really sums up my mantra in life. Yes, we can give you everything you want in the way of style, quality, fit, color, comfort, hand, price, and by the way, also to be socially and environmentally responsible through, all of the methodologies and farm practices, all the way through to social compliance, renewable energy, water stewardship, material health, material use. So really key touch points are regeneration, circularity, and now technology. So now we actually have a blockchain technology that goes all the way to a QR code on our products that helps to digitize and then tell the stories of our supply chains from source to story and talk about, every input. And the fact that we're eliminating all harmful inputs, the fact that we're certified to the GOTS standard, which is the Global Organic Textile Standard, or the Cradle to Cradle standard, or the Fair Trade standards, or all of the above. And then in addition to that, we talk about the farmers and the factory workers and photos and videos, and we tell stories on our blockchain platform. But we also bring impact data that is getting ready to come up our blockchain, from being able to measure those impacts in carbon, energy use, water use, and all of the other, benefits by truly driving sustainable agriculture, which I call myself a soil junkie. That really is my sweet spot and my wheelhouse, having been, for the last 30 years, connecting the dots from food, beauty, and fiber.
That's just wow. And I hope that as many brands as possible could do what you are doing on the ground, connecting all the possible dots. Now, for larger businesses, they could afford the shift, you see. What steps could small businesses take to make the transition towards sustainable textile or fashion industry? Because having all the technology platforms such as blockchain and AI is on the higher end for them. How could they ensure to abide by sustainability?
So my favorite number is 11 because 1 plus 1 equals 11. And that just signifies the fact that we're all stronger together than we are apart. So with that, I would say collaboration is key. Don't look through the lens of competition. Look at cooperation. How can you hold hands with other like-minded brands to innovate, to move the needle, to buy, and consolidate purchasing of more sustainable fibers and materials? There are many organizations out there today where you can join these organizations and then you can be part of a bigger picture of, collaboration, such as the Textile Exchange, or which is a global effort to connect, the suppliers and the vendors with the brands and the retailers and help build these supply chain strategies. Also organic trade associations, or in your country, there are all over the world. There are amazing trade organizations that are now, really forming and growing with, people coming together to share ideas. And then MetaWear, which is our, manufacturing platform, we call it the Intel Inside of sustainable fashion. We're here to work with small to large brands and retailers to help them, get to their goals. A lot of companies today are setting pretty big goals. We want to be 100% sustainable cotton by 2025. We want to be, reduce our carbon footprint by 45% by 2030, which is actually an industry-wide commitment that the fashion industry is making through the textile industry. There's also, commitments around divesting from certain countries to, mitigate risk, as we've all learned from the pandemic. There's a whole new level of risks out there that we haven't really experienced in the past when it comes to supply chain management and logistics. And so there's a lot of onshoring that's happening right now. So smaller brands and, out there can look to companies like MetaWear to help them get where they need to go. And, we're all about customization, right? Plug and play. So, what are the stories you want to tell? What are the products you want to make? What are your price targets? And what is the brand? And we help you configure and manage and map that. So, there are other companies like MetaWear as well, but really it's about going out and getting the support, joining organizations, and, and not the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, right? So it can be very daunting, but it's not about, getting from point A to point Z overnight. It's about one step at a time, as long as that step is forward.
Wonderful, wonderful. You, apart from the textile industry, you also led business in green foods. What are the initiatives for low cost sustainable agriculture that could be implemented on ground?
Well, it's interesting because I talk a lot about cotton because I'm in the fashion industry now. But, what people don't realize is 60% of a cotton plant actually goes into the food stream, right? Because when you gin cotton, you have all that seed that gets pressed and turned into cottonseed oil and actually goes into breads and snack products. It goes into feed for dairy. So the connection between food and fiber is actually quite significant, not just at agriculture, but also at popular culture, right? So today's consumer, we're always educating that our food doesn't grow in the supermarket and our clothing doesn't grow in the department store, right? People's lives are being affected and our environment is being affected. So it's really about understanding all the way, starting at agriculture. How do we rotate crops, food and fiber crops together to build soil health, right? Because that's the whole basis for organic and regenerative agriculture, is we've degraded and depleted our soil's ecosystems and biodiversity so significantly. Now it's time we have to rebuild the nutrients in the soil, to rebuild those ecosystems, to then, as mentioned earlier, sequester carbon from the atmosphere when it turns back into the sponge that it's meant to be. So food and fiber are, absolutely interconnected at that level, where, on our farms, we rotate with lentils and pigeon peas and many other food crops. And then moving all the way to, at the consumer level is, organic happens to be a very low hanging fruit for people to understand. When I started my career, everybody in the global organic industry knew each other. That's how small it was. But today, that whole movement has grown significantly at double-digit rates for 20 consecutive years here in the US. In fact, I think 84% of Americans now are buying organic food at least occasionally. So the awareness is very strong. And so having been in the trenches, myself, since, the 90s, really building, new food systems. And again, when I talk about the yes and philosophy, it's not just about fashion. In food, the yes is taste and quality and price. And the and is, fair trade, organic, regenerative, all the things that enhance, the food system. So it's very much of a similar story, whether you're talking about food, beauty, fashion. My book, Eco Renaissance, Co-Creating a Stylish, Sexy, and Sustainable World, which is actually available on Amazon worldwide, US, UK, Australia, so on. It really connects the dots from art to food to wellness to beauty to fashion and business. And it's built on what I call the 5 C's that are really fundamental to a paradigm shift across all of these sectors. And those 5 C's are creativity, because we're all creators and we can create whatever reality we just see. Right? Connection, because it's all interconnected, as we've all learned through this pandemic. Right. And, even with nature and our environment, we're not outside of nature. We're a part of nature. We breathe out carbon and nature breathes in carbon, and nature breathes out oxygen and we breathe in oxygen. So we have a symbiotic, interconnected relationship with nature. And then community, because we all are a part of a global community. It's like the butterfly effect. What happens over here, there's a cause and effect. To every action, there's a reaction, and we're all in this together, right? And then consciousness, because we have to climb that ladder of consciousness. We have to change our perspective and see things differently. Food, not just for the sake of eating, but food for healing, for nurturing, right? For feeding us and feeding the planet and taking, from the earth and giving back to the earth, right? So we have this circular way of seeing things, and we stop with all the waste, and we stop with all the destruction and the pollution and the chemical invasion of our systems, really. And then the last C is all about collaboration. And as I mentioned before, it's about co-creation. It's about 1 + 1 = 11. It's about coming together to change our systems, because as Albert Einstein once said, we can't solve today's problems with the same consciousness that created those problems. We have to change our consciousness. We have to work together. And today, climate change is the single greatest threat to humanity ever. And we all need to hold hands and be a part of that solution versus the problem.
Excellent. What a quote to remember. I'm sure all of us are listening to the insights given by Marci, and it's really thoughtful and insightful. Now, while you are doing all these wonderful things, what are some of the challenges in supply chain that you face, and how do you ensure sustainable operational practices for your end products?
Yeah, well, supply chain issues have actually magnified quite substantially during the pandemic, of course. So today, I would say, the biggest supply chain issues have really down to logistics, managing logistics, managing integrity issues. So when you talk about sustainability, a couple things have happened over the last 2 years that have really, become front and center. First of all, there was a huge debacle in cotton in China during the pandemic in an area called Xinjiang, where a fifth of the world's cotton is being grown. And it was exposed that there was forced labor in that region. And so the US banned cotton coming out of China, which created a massive, mess out there in terms of companies, brands that were all manufacturing in China, looking to divest and looking to find other sources. Fortunately, having spent the last several decades working in India, my team, has caught a lot of these balls and companies that are now looking to diversify. And India is now the largest grower of cotton in the world, even above China. And so, really managing the supply and the demand has been quite a challenge because there's been a resurgence of demand. And then in addition to that, a lot of players have jumped into the world of sustainability, right? Drinking the proverbial, organic or regenerative, sustainable Kool-Aid, and then they don't know what they're doing. And that sort of leaves them vulnerable, knowingly or unknowingly, to missteps. So there have been other issues that have occurred, such as, there was a company that actually was falsifying some certifications under the organic umbrella, and that got exposed, and that also created quite a bit of backlash. And so, really it comes down to understanding what to ask, what to look for. And I've spent, many years in the trenches really learning about, how can you navigate the complexities of supply chains and know at every touch point what to ask and what to look for. And, and then there's the whole social compliance issue, which, has been devastating, where a lot of farmers and factory workers, were really at the bottom of the totem pole, where, when brands and retailers canceled orders with factories, they were the ones who got hurt the worst in terms of supporting their livelihoods. So the social justice issues in the supply chains are also ones that we have to look at. We have to take care of the people that are growing and sewing our products. I can tell you in cotton, even before the pandemic, people think cotton is a natural fiber and, and liken it to milk, right? It's natural. But if you really pull the curtain back and you unveil the human and environmental impacts that are happening in cotton, it's not quite as natural as you would think. The same way that milk, especially in America, if it's not, it's often ridden with hormones and antibiotics and steroids and other inputs that have been, put into or shot into cows, and not to mention factory farming and all the other issues. So similarly in cotton, in cotton farming, and I'll just use India as an example, every half an hour, you'll hear, that a conventional cotton farmer is actually committing suicide. And the reason is they get stuck on what we call the pesticide treadmill, right? Where they're lured in by the seed and chemical companies. They are then using these chemicals with this understanding or belief that it's going to enhance their farms, their yields, their plants, and then ultimately their livelihoods. But what happens is over time, the bugs build resistance to the chemicals. The chemicals have to get stronger, and the farmers can't afford the heavier doses of chemicals. So they leverage their farms to banks. They're actually in partnership with seed and chemical companies. And over time, this perpetuates, right? Where they weaken the soil, they weaken the plants, the bugs come back, the chemical sprays get stronger, they continue to deteriorate their soil, and they continue to leverage their farms to banks, to the point where in the end, the banks own their farms. They're going into despair, and they're drinking pesticides and committing suicide. So that in and of itself is a social issue around cotton that has to stop. Not to mention, of course, cotton is one of the most heavily sprayed industries in the world in terms of the most carcinogenic, because the misconception again is we're not putting it in our bodies, right? So why does it matter, if we're not eating it? But we are, as I mentioned earlier, 60% is going into the food stream. Plus, the skin is the largest organ in our bodies, and it's our primary organ for absorption. So it's not just what we put in our bodies, it's also what we put on our bodies, right? So, as we start to think about our supply chains and how broken they've been for years and how destructive they've been, right? And how much pollution and how much, impact they're having, we have to change these systems. And it really does start at the source. It starts at these supply chains. And I would liken that to, metaphorically to what's happened during the pandemic, right? Where in our own source, in our own, soul, in our own gut, we're reshifting our own priorities. We're looking through different lens of health and wellness and sustainability now, unlike ever before. And that source that's lighting up inside of us, because we couldn't go outside, we could only go inside, right? So going deep inside and thinking about what matters and family and community and the environment around us, that is now reflected in the way we're looking at source in products, right? And it started with the farm to table movement, but now it is segueing to starting at the source of our fashion, right? And that means starting at the raw materials and building up the supply chain instead of starting at factories and building down supply chains, so that we know what's going into our products, so that we know what's going into ourselves, right? Because everything that we buy as consumers, right, is an extension of who we are, because it goes in, on, or around ourselves, our bodies. And so we have to be thinking differently across the board, from source to story to shelf, right? To each one of us plays a role in this shift that's underway. And that's what I call the eco-renaissance, right? The rebirth of humanity, built on this awakening that we're all a part of a collective ecosystem, and that every decision and every choice we make is a part of that ecosystem, and that through the lens of design, we can change the world.
Marci, this is a very huge task. And it is a very huge task, and I'm sure we need a lot of collaboration in order to achieve this vision. And yes, of course, it is good for all of us, and I hope that through this show we can have as many collaborations as much as possible to realize this vision. Now, I have seen many products which are sustainable, even when it comes to food, organic food. But affordability is a kind of challenge to masses. So, how do you ensure affordability of sustainable fashion and organic food so that it could be used even at the ground level?
Yeah. So, when I started my career, there were really three stigmas that were attached to sustainability, right? The first one is that you have to give something up, that it's about sacrifice or deprivation. And when I talked about the yes, right? The yes is give people what they want. In food, that's taste. In beauty, it's functionality and scent. In fashion, it's style. In business, it's profits, right? You have to lead with that. And then it's, oh, by the way, it's also, all these other layers. That's the and, right? So the first stigma, is about, in fashion, it's not about it's crunchy or frumpy or boxy or beige or boring. That's what we were trying to move away from. The second stigma is that it's overpriced and you can't afford it, and sustainability is out of reach for the average person, which you just spoke to. And that's not the case. The reason that historically there was that sort of myth or misconception is because in the early years of these movements around shifting paradigms in business, right, we had to do a lot of innovation, and innovation comes with a cost. And it's all about supply and demand, right? And so when you don't have the demand yet, but you have to build the then it is a little more of an expensive endeavor. We also are paying people more fairly, right, in our supply chains. And that would show up, when you're doing smaller volumes of production. But when you start to do bigger volumes, you start to grow demand, you start to grow supply. Again, the economic model, you can be more efficient and you can amortize different premiums across a larger production or a larger supply chain. That's piece one. Piece two is it's about vertical integration. So breaking that stigma that you have to pay a lot more has always been a very big part of my, core part of my work, where, I've always wanted to democratize sustainable fashion and organic food and really, show people that, again, it's not about giving something up. It's about getting more. It's about more value, right? It's getting value and values. Right? So when you start to look through the lens of vertical integration, and as I mentioned earlier, building supply chains from farm to finished product, you can be more efficient. A garment, as an example, people don't realize can change hands 7 to 10 times, sometimes even more in a supply chain, because it will go from the raw material, or if it's the farm, then the gin, then it goes into spinning, then it goes into knitting or weaving. Then you have cutting, sewing, dyeing, printing, finishing, embroideries, packaging, shipping. You have so many layers in the supply chain. And oftentimes when you're building the supply chain down, there are brokers at every step of the way. There's a fabric broker, a yarn broker, a cotton broker, right? So to be more efficient, to democratize sustainable fashion, we build up and we actually eliminate a lot of the middlemen and a lot of those excess costs so that we can be competitive on price in the end. So then we shift the question from why would I buy organic food or sustainable fashion to why wouldn't I? If I can have everything I want in taste, in quality, in style, in fit, everything on the yes, then why wouldn't I want the and, right? All the social and environmental compliance. And I think if you present to people from that place and you say, look, given all things equal with two products and one is embedded with, climate action and social justice and environmental responsibility, and here's how, and here's the why, right? Taking them down that sort of proverbial rabbit hole of, you've got everything you want and there's so much more. And let me tell you about that. Then, consumers really today are ready to vote with their dollars and to be the change, eat the change, drink the change, and wear the change they all wish to see in the world.
Wonderful. I have my last question, but not the least. To the vision that you want to realize, IICSR is a dedicated institute to develop responsible business leadership. Now, what kind of courses or knowledge gaps do you see in the industry which we can bridge in order to develop more responsible business leadership in the textile or the food industry, or to make things more sustainable in the corporates?
Yeah. So I think two areas probably are front and center the most for me. One would be women's leadership. I think, even to this day and all the years that, I've been as a woman-owned business and a leader, I try to recruit women onto my teams. I try to support women in my supply chains, put women on my boards. But I still, find it sad when I go into a room and it's 99% men, or I'm in even when I'm in India and I'm in the factories and the farms and the women are working, but you go into the executive, meetings and it's a, full room of men and very few women. So I'd really love to see and empower more women, not just, to be in the workforce, but to be in leadership positions. And I think that really comes down to, and what I'm seeing today here in this country is, a lot more women, private equity funds are being born, and venture capital and sources of money to support women in business, because that's always been a huge issue, women getting funded, because, there's the, again, misconception that women aren't going to be, work as hard because they're going to be moms, they're going to be, balancing their family lives, but so are men, right? And so I think that whole mindset has to shift. I think the other thing that's happening is, transparency, right? That the foundation of all of my life work, of the whole sustainability movement, because we're only as good as our, what we're actually doing. And this isn't a marketing proposition. This is actually doing the good work and making sure that, we're doing it right, that we're crossing our T's and we're dotting our I's. So I think courses on teaching people what that actually means, right? And what are those impacts we're trying to address, social and, the water issues and the energy issues and the climate change issues and chemical issues. And how do we, reduce our dependence on all of these, unfortunately on the overuse, and especially in fashion with the proliferation of fast fashion, the overuse of our resources. How do we get more efficient? How do we get smarter, right? And then the segueing, regenerative and circular mindset into technology. So a third, kind of bucket would be, to teach people about the new technologies that are out there. I mean, I'm blown away. I've been, on this journey a long time, and I still feel like I'm learning new things every day because there's so much innovation happening. And fashion technology, food technology is really also changing the game and helping us meet more of our sustainability goals, because we're finding ways and solutions that didn't exist before. And in the case of fashion, that could be direct to printing, robotics, 3D printing, blockchain technologies, AI, the whole metaverse, right? And even all of the technologies that's allowing for us to tell the stories of our supply chains and our brands and our products that consumers want to hear about, especially the younger generations. So social and digital media, and learning how to package this knowledge and not only, be in the trenches, building products that are more sustainable and learning about, the why and the how to do it, but ultimately how to communicate, what we're doing with that backup, right? So I think it really comes down to, again, looking at regeneration and agriculture and the importance of agriculture and the importance of protecting all of our ecosystems, frankly. Looking at circular business models. I think circularity is a very important topic in school today and in programs to understand what that means, the cradle to cradle principles, right? That, what we take from the earth, we give back to the earth, as I mentioned earlier. And then all the technologies that are out there that are really driving these movements forward.
Excellent. Now I have a follow-up question for you, if you don't mind. Since you mentioned about empowering women entrepreneurs, so does your company also train them to create sustainable fashion products, and then builds up a supply chain from them and does forward market linkage? Maybe women in the rural areas of India, since you all have your presence over here. So does your company engages in that activity?
Yeah. So first of all, when I hire, I do look through the lens of trying to build as many women onto my team as I can. I do the same thing with my boards. We have a partnership with an organization called the Women's Earth Alliance. And we, not only in the US, have we collaborated on product, like we just did International Women's Day. We did a campaign that says, when women thrive, the earth thrives, right? And that's very much, I love to say, love your mother, right? Because we have to love our Mother Earth while we also love our mother, the what we depend on for life. And then, we also partner with Women's Earth Alliance in our supply chains. And we are building right now at our farms a partnership that will allow for women at the farm level to have secondary sources of income and to further their education. And so, yes, for me personally, when I'm in India, I really push all of my partners at the farm level, at the factory level, to hire more women, to work with more women, to anywhere that we can support that process as a company, at ECOfashion Corp, at MetaWear, at Farm to Home, at Seed to Style, and at Yes And. We are doing so. And that's something that, women supporting women at every step in our supply chains, all the way to the end consumer, which, for the most part are women. Not to say men aren't shopping, but women represent over 80% of the, fashion that, is bought out there. So, we really do look to, every step of the way, see women in leadership, as mentioned earlier, as well as, part of the win-win model that we're very committed to at ECOfashion Corp.
So y'all would be open for collaborations with NGOs or social enterprises
Absolutely.
who are doing the. Okay, wonderful. So
Absolutely. And I also do
when
mentoring.
we do have.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It would be great if you are also doing mentoring to these self-help groups and the women who are trying to empower themselves by your model.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm very open. And collaboration is it's a part of my DNA, right? And even when I'm at the farms and I'm working with female farmers and we talk about the seed, and the seed represents life, right? And that's where it all begins. And so anywhere along, from, I'm very committed to the Sustainable Development Goals, and, really driving climate action and social justice, as mentioned, gender equality. Anywhere that you see collaborations, I'm certainly open to exploring possibilities.
Excellent. We have a question from one of our panelists. I know that we are taking too much of the time, but if you would allow, may I invite Mr. Kishore to ask you a question?
Sure.
Great. Thanks for giving me
Kishore,
the
over to
opportunity
you.
to ask. Yes, thank you. Quick question. Marci, how do you benchmark, sustainability in your organization, carbon footprinting, any ranking or measure that you have, which you, follow within your organization? Can you put some light on it, please?
Yeah, so we have a partnership with an organization in India that's called InfiniChain, and they're part of our blockchain network. We're working now on doing soil studies that will ultimately be translated up our blockchain. We're working on the impact data to measure carbon in the soil. Also, we're working with factories that are driving renewable energy. So one of our big knit factories today is 100% renewable energy. They're based down in Tamil Nadu as well, in Tirupur. And we're really, anywhere right now that we can be driving and making decisions based on mitigating, the climate risk through, building better carbon solutions as well as carbon offsets. We are kind of very hands-on. In terms of measurement, we're still at the beginning stages now of putting that plan together. But in the next 6 months, we will have that impact data like carbon and renewable energy use and so on coming up our supply chain, as well as coming up our blockchain. So we'll be able to quantify and measure that data. We have a company we're in partnership at the farm level right now called Bhumitra, which actually has a satellite technology that's allowing for them to measure carbon in the soil. And they'll be able to do that over time as well. So that's also underway and getting set up. There are a lot of certifications out there. Some of them are more, some of them are going deeper, but it's very complex to look at the carbon impact of a full supply chain. But that is part of what's happening right now in our company. We're working at every, step of the way to build that model to then be able to communicate that model, as I said, in the next 6 months or so.
Very impressive. Thank you very much.
Of course. We're just at the beginning.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, as long as I've been doing this, I feel like relatively speaking, we're still at our infancy. We're just getting started. This movement, I always say it's like the modern day Star Wars, right? You've got still the old systems that are kind of the dark fighting the light, right? And we're in this dynamic now all over the world of like these sort of paradoxical systems, right? And I've always said it's about bridging the tree hugger and the fashionista, or the tribe and the boardroom, and bringing worlds together, so that we can have, we can co-create a new reality. And I think that, that is, I think with climate change now really being something that is connecting our entire, global community. I think we're all in this together, and we all need to play a role. And I think, I can't do the work that I do without my teams and my family in India, right? But fortunately, I think everybody is receptive in ways they never have been before. And when I talk to farmers and factory workers, and they are experiencing, climate change in ways that I might not be, as much, with especially being in agriculture, I think it is a responsibility of brands and entrepreneurs and companies, no matter where you are in the world, to be looking at your supply chains and the people who are part of, bringing your model to life. And so it starts at the seed, or it starts at the source. And we all have to hold hands here and make change happen.
Thank you so much, Marci. We have some admirers over here. Miss Meeta Sindhanti from US itself. She's based out of Washington, D.C. She's admiring your company. Mr. Manu Chandramohan. Mr. Jha has a question around waste management, if you would want to address. And yes, we have Mr. Jeannie Ruda, who is also admiring you as a Wonder Woman who walks the talk.
Thank you. So in terms of waste, waste management, I'll just say, it is very much along the lines of circularity, right? Is this, we've made enough synthetics through the years, in the textile industry, in the last actually 60, 70 years, every single synthetic garment in the history of mankind has never biodegraded, right? So think about it this way: anything made of polyester or, acrylic or, any of the synthetics, nylon, all are the little microfibers are starting to disintegrate in our washing machines, which go into our water systems, our rivers, and ultimately our oceans. So I've spoken a lot about soil and soil health, right? Soil being the skin of the earth. But what about our oceans ecosystems, right? So we also have seen incredible amounts of, plastic microfiber pollution that's going into our oceans and killing our ocean ecosystems. So when you talk about waste, there's a lot of different layers. Number one, we can't let all of this disposable fashion go into our landfills, which is really where it's going. Plastic bottle waste, right? We're actually there's a company called Unify that has a yarn called Reprieve, that they've taken 25 million plastic bottles out of landfills to create these new yarns. So it's how do we eliminate waste, not just from the beginning, designing differently, right? Using scraps differently from our textile production, which a company called Recover collects scraps and they turn scraps into new yarns, or turning fibers and finished materials and finished fashion into next generation product. All of that is starting to happen. We're seeing tremendous innovation in circularity to minimize and eliminate waste in the supply chain so that all that fashion doesn't go back into or go into our landfills, in that linear model that I spoke to. In addition, other ways of eliminating waste in the fashion industry even have to do with printing. In fact, I'm in partnership with an organization called Kornit, a company called Kornit, and Kornit is the largest direct-to-garment printer in the world. So now instead of screen printing, where there's a ton of waste and wasted inks and runoff, we're actually printing to order, custom on-demand production. That's also happening with manufacturing, right? Where there's something called lean manufacturing, where instead of batch processing, where we're processing in huge, minimums, you can do one-off production. So you don't have all that inventory waste, right? And then on the level of food waste, there's a lot of innovation happening around taking food waste and turning it into fiber and fashion textiles, right? So orange, banana, pineapple, mushroom, seaweed. We're seeing incredible innovation around, even hemp and taking all of the waste, even down to the stalks that would normally either get burned or sold off, and we're turning those into secondary markets, right? Whether it be extracting the fiber and making fiber out of banana stalks, which is something we're working on actually out of India right now, or it's taking, food waste and actually turning that into new materials like orange peel, right? So much happening, and there is material change happening to eliminate waste. There is technology change happening to eliminate waste. And at the end of the day, we're designing differently. I think that is critically important as well.
Wonderful. It has been a true pleasure talking to you, knowing the work that you're doing, an absolute inspiration for all of us, not only for women entrepreneurs, but to all the entrepreneurs and being a responsible business leader above all. Thank you so very much for joining us. You're an extremely visionary entrepreneur with very honest efforts. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Namaste. Have a wonderful day or wonderful evening, and look forward to meeting you in the future.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Namaste.
Have a great night. Namaste.
Thank you.